Welcome to today's Linguistic History Explainer, everyone. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here. We're going to treat this like a masterclass in orthography today. We're literally peeling back the layers of the very letters you text, type, and write with every single day. We often just take the alphabet for granted. We treat it like this ancient, unchanging monolith that was handed down to us perfectly formed. But the truth? The truth is far messier, way more human, and honestly, incredibly fascinating. So grab your notes, get settled in, and get ready, because we are about to decode the surprisingly recent and kind of chaotic evolution of some of our most common letters.
Okay, let's dive right into this. If you ask around, you'll frequently hear this very common myth that U was the absolute final letter to be invented and added to our modern alphabet. Now, it is true that U has a super unique and delayed history, and it shares a really long, complex origin story with another letter. But to say it was the final one invented, that actually contains some major historical inaccuracies. To understand why, we've got to go all the way back to the very beginning of its lineage.
Here's the syllabus for our explainer today. We'll be covering the shared origin of U and V, the positional rules of medieval aesthetics, and their definitive separation. Then we'll look at the evolution of J, and finally, the late letter W.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, the origin of U and V.
Imagine you're a Roman citizen living 2,000 years ago. The alphabet you'd interact with looks significantly different than ours today. The biggest, most glaring omission? The letter U simply did not exist. No way, not at all. Instead, the Romans relied entirely on a single grapheme, the letter V in its uppercase form or cursive U in lowercase. But here is the absolutely crucial part. They used this one single symbol to represent two completely distinct sounds, depending purely on the phonetic context. They used it for the vowel sound U, like you hear in the word uno, but they also used that exact same letter for the semiconsonant sound wa, kind of like the initial sound in the Spanish word huevo. One letter pulling double duty for a vowel and a consonant sound. Just imagine being a Roman stone carver having to navigate that puzzle.
Now, what's really interesting is how this played out in reality. Take a look at this classical inscription, IVVNTEUS. This is the Latin word for youth, which translates to juventud in Spanish. So the person reading this inscription out loud had to just know that the first V functions as the vowel U, while the second V, the one immediately following it, acts as the semiconsonant. In the exact same word, sitting right next to each other, the same visual letter requires two completely different vocalizations. It was a system built entirely on context, totally ignoring precise orthography.
Moving right along to Section 2, medieval aesthetics.
So the classical system survived the fall of the Roman Empire. But as we enter the Middle Ages, things got surprisingly unscientific. During this era, the difference between writing the U and a V became purely positional and, well, aesthetic for scribes and early printers. They completely ignored how the words actually sounded. If a sound occurred at the very beginning of a word, they used the pointed V shape, so a word like upon was written VPON. But if the sound was in the middle or at the end of a word, they used the rounded U shape. Therefore, a word like have was written HAUE. The shape of the letter had absolutely nothing to do with phonetics. Whether it was a vowel or a consonant sound didn't matter. It was all about how it looked on the page based on its position.
That brings us to Section 3, the definitive separation.
We can actually trace this massive orthographic evolution chronologically. Now, unlike character-based systems like Chinese, which creates entirely new logograms for new concepts, European alphabetic systems had to sort of fracture and adapt existing letters for new phonetic sounds. We start with Rome sharing the V, slide into those weird positional rules of the Middle Ages, and finally hit the 16th century. This is when European humanists and printers finally step in and say, okay, enough is enough. They begin to formally separate the shapes based on sound, V for the consonant and U for the vocalic vowel sound. It was a massive leap forward for linguistic clarity. And if we look specifically at the Spanish language, this phonetic division was officially consolidated by the spelling rules of the Real Academia Española, the RAE, in the 18th century. It literally took hundreds of years to split one letter into two.
Next up, Section 4, the evolution of J. But hey, U isn't the only letter that had to go through a messy divorce from a parent symbol. Remember that initial myth we talked about, that U was the last letter added? Well, J actually challenges that title. Just as U evolved from V to give the vowel its own distinct symbol in the 16th century, the letter J underwent the exact same process during the 16th and 17th centuries. J evolved from the letter I. For centuries, I was used for both the vowel sound and its corresponding consonant sound.
It wasn't until this great phonetic awakening that J became completely independent, giving that consonant sound its own dedicated letter on the page.
And finally, Section 5, the late letter W.
And this brilliantly illustrates our next point. If you thought the 16th century edition of U was late, consider W, 1969, the year humanity walked on the moon, the year of Woodstock, and, incredibly, the year the letter W officially joined the Spanish alphabet rules. Why so incredibly late? Well, unlike U, which was actually needed to clarify native Latin vowel sounds, the W wasn't really necessary for native Spanish words. The RAE only officially incorporated it in 1969 out of sheer necessity to accommodate foreign loanwords and names from languages like English and German. Think about that. Our parents or grandparents were alive when the final letter was officially locked into the Spanish academic dictionary. Mind-blowing, right?
So, what does this all mean? What are our key takeaways from today's lecture? First, U is a late addition, separating from V in the 16th century, but it is for sure not the last letter. Second, J shares this exact same twin history, becoming independent from I right around the same time, stretching into the 17th century. And finally, the W was officially codified into Spanish academic rules shockingly late in 1969. What this all demonstrates is that the letters we think of as ancient, immutable foundations of human communication, they're actually relatively recent, evolving additions to our modern alphabet. They were shaped by the practical needs of carvers, the aesthetic whims of medieval scribes, the logic of Renaissance printers, and the delayed rules of modern academies.
Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought to conclude our explainer today. If our alphabet took over a millennium to realize it needed separate letters for U, V, I, and J, and literally waited until the space age to officially codify W in some languages, what sounds in our modern, rapidly changing digital language are still waiting for their own letter today? Language is a living, breathing thing. It's evolving right now as we speak. I really hope this lesson completely changes how you look at your keyboard. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and thank you so much for joining me today.